Hello students, welcome to the class of software engineering. Today let us discuss about the system models. There are mainly two kinds of system design model. First one is structural models. We've already studied about it in the previous video sessions. Structural models, and another one is the dynamic models. So let us see about the structural models first. Already you know about it. So structural models describe the static structure of the system. So how it describes? That is through the classes. So you are showing the classes, objects in the classes and their relationships. So you are marking the important relationships there. Important relationships that may be documented at this stage. You have studied some of the relationships like generalization. Generalization is nothing but inheritance. So what is inheritance? You are inheriting a new class from already existing class. Then you have some other relationships like uses, means one class uses another class. So uses or used by relationship, we have that relationship also. And composition relationship is which one? Aggregation. One whole object is composed of several different parts. Clear? So that is about the structural models. So mainly describes the static structure of the system and mainly shows the different object classes in your system and their relationships. So relationships can be generalization, aggregation, all those. Second one, dynamic models. What is the dynamic model? They mainly describe the dynamic structure of your system and it will show mainly the interactions between the system objects. So it mainly shows what? The dynamic structure of your system and also the interactions. Your main thing is it will show the interactions between the system objects which help you to understand easily. So interactions that may be documented include the sequence of service requests made by objects. So interactions means like one object might make a request for a particular service with another object. Another thing is interactions is like change in the state of the object of the system. So how there is a change in the state of the system? Once it is triggered by some of the events, there is change in the state of the object. So we will study one state diagram here. Okay. So this is very important. State diagram for weather station system that shows how it responds to request for various services. So let us see about that one. So this is the actual figure. So this is the state diagram. We call this one as a state diagram. So figure name is weather station state diagram. Okay. So you have to note that this black blob indicates the initial state. So what are these? Shutdown, control, running, testing, transmitting, collecting, summarizing, configuring. All these are the different states of your system. So how you are representing the states? With rounded rectangles. Okay. And what is this? Shutdown, restart, configuration done. These are the messages or the events. So which mainly trigger your system to change its state. So let us see the state diagram now. So the initial state here is shutdown state. So we'll begin that. If the system state is shut down, then it can respond to a restart, a reconfigure, or a power save message. Just look at the diagram. Now initially your state is in shutdown state. So it can respond to messages like it can receive a reconfigure message, power save, or restart. Okay. The unlabeled arrow with the black blob indicates that the shutdown state is the initial state, which I have told. A restart message. Can you see here a restart message? So once this state receives a restart message, what happens? Yeah, the state of your system will be moved to running state. Running state means what? A restart message causes a transition to normal operation. This normal operation. Okay. Both the power save and reconfigure messages cause a transition to a state in which the system reconfigures itself. So once it receives a restart message, that means it is moved to which state? Running state. Means it is in normal state now. Normal operations can be performed. Now once it receives reconfigure or power save message, it's both in one. So the system will reconfigure itself. So it moves to configuring state. Configuring state. Okay. So once the configuration done, it will move to running state. Clear? Once the configuration is done, it will move to a running state. So here the state diagram shows that reconfiguration is only allowed if the system has been shut down. So reconfiguration is only allowed. Now you can see here that reconfiguration is only allowed if your system has been shut down. So that is the first point. Is it clear? Okay. Now second point we'll move on to. In the running state, where is the running state? This one. Now imagine your system has received a restart message. So from shutdown state, it has moved to running state. Now in the running state, the system expects further messages. So if a shutdown message is received, what happens? Now in the running state, a shutdown message is received means when your system is in running state and it receives shutdown message means it will go back to which state? Shutdown. Your system should shut down, isn't it? So it is moved back to the shutdown state. This is the transition. Okay. If a shutdown message is received, the object returns to the shutdown state. Third point, if a report weather message is received, can you see here? Report weather. This message is received means, report weather message is received means, the system will move to the summarizing state. Summarizing state. So system will move to the summarizing state. So what happens in the summarizing state? It will summarize all the data and prepare a summary report of that weather data. Clear? Okay. Next, when the summary is complete, now I've told that weather summary complete. So if the summary of the weather data report is complete, then your system moves to a transmitting state. Transmitting state. Can you see one more state here? That is transmitting state. So now your system is in which state? Transmitting state. Means the information can be transmitted to the remote system. The information can be transmitted to the remote system. From the remote system, can you see transmission done? Transmitting state means now that information can be transmitted to the remote system. So here, from the transmitting state, it will move to running state. There the transmission is done. It then returns to the running state. Clear? Fourth point. If a report status message is received, can you see report status message is received, then your system is in running state now. It will move to which state? Testing state. Testing state. So what you can see is, if a report status message is received, the system moves to the testing state. That is from the running state to the testing state. And then what happens? It moves to the state. Once the testing is complete, test complete, it moves to which state? Transmitting state. It moves to transmitting state. Okay. Before returning to the running state. Before returning to the running state. Okay. Now fifth point. If a signal from the clock is received, the system moves to the collecting state. Now, transmission done. So it will move to the running state. Now if, what message they are telling? If a signal from the clock is received. So here you have the clock, isn't it? So if the signal from the clock is received now, the system moves to the collecting state. Which state? Collecting state. From running state to collecting state. So once it receives the signal, clock signal, then it moves from the running state to the collecting state. So what does it do in the collecting state? It will collect all the various data from the different set of instruments. It collects the various data from the different set of instruments. So each instrument is instructed in turn to collect its data from the associated sensors. Okay. Then one more message you can see here. That is remote control message. Can you see here? Remote control message. So if a remote control message is received, the system moves to a controlled state. Which state? Control state. So once the remote control message is received, from running state, it moves to which state? Controlled state. It moves to controlled state. So here it will respond to different set of messages from the remote control room. So these are not shown in this diagram, but this actually happens. So it responds to a different set of messages from the remote control room. From the remote control room. So these are not shown on this diagram. So this is the actual explanation of the state diagram. So you can see different states. Once it receives, initial state is shutdown state. Once it receives restart message, moves to running state, means get back to its normal operation. If it receives a reconfigure or power save message, it will move to configuring state, where it will reconfigure itself. Okay. Then from the running state, if it receives a report weather message, it moves to summarizing state. And once the weather summary is complete, it moves to transmitting state. And from transmitting, it moves to running state. And now if it receives report status message, it will move to testing state. And once the testing is complete, it will move to transmitting state. And from transmitting state, it moves to running state. And if it receives any clock signal, then it will move to collecting state, where it will collect all the data from various set of instruments. Okay, and then it will go back to a running state once the collection is done. And finally, once it receives the remote control message, it will move from running state to control state. So here it will perform a certain set of operations based on the messages it receives from the remote control room. Now let us discuss about interface specification. So you have heard of this word interface. Already you have studied in Java, isn't it, about interface. So interface design is concerned with specifying the detail of the interface to an object or to a group of objects. Okay, so interface design. So what is interface design in software engineering? Interface design is concerned with specifying the details of the interface to an object. So mainly how one object can call the method of another object, that is through interface. So this interface should be designed. You need to specify the details of the interface. So it can be an interface to a particular object, or you can build an interface to a group of objects. This means defining the signatures and semantics of the services that are provided by the object or by a group of objects. So this means that you are defining the semantics or the signatures of the services that are provided by the object. Okay. Next, interfaces can be specified in the UML using the same notation as a class diagram. So how we are specifying the interface in the UML? It is similar to your class diagram. How we are representing a class in the UML, the same diagram. But one thing, there is no attribute section. There is no attribute section, keep in mind. But while doing the class diagram, first top will be the class name, then next section will be the attribute section, and the last section will be the operations or the methods section. But in the case of your interface, same way how you are representing the class diagram, but there is no attribute section. And the UML stereotype, we are using this one, interface, should be included in the name part. So in the name part, when you are giving a name to the interface, you have to use this UML stereotype interface. Okay, this keyword you have to use. Clear? Okay. Next thing is, it should not include details of the data representation in an interface design. So you should not include the details of the data representation in an interface design. So that is the most important thing in an interface. So you should not include the details of the data representation. As you know that attributes are not defined in an interface specification. You are not going to define the attributes in the interface specification. Clear? So keep in mind how to represent the interface, and there are no attribute section here. Okay, next. It should include operations to access and update the data. So what should be included in your interface? Should include operations to access and update the data. So you know that data representation is hidden in interface. Data representation is hidden in interface. It can be easily changed without affecting the objects that use that data. So you know that data representation is hidden, so it can be easily changed without affecting the objects that actually use that data. So we will see a figure now. Just see the diagram. The figure name is weather station interfaces. So what all interfaces we are going to use in the weather station? So we are going to see the interfaces being used in the weather station. So I've told that interface you are representing as a class diagram only. So at the top section you will be having the interface name. What is the interface name? Reporting. This is the interface name, and you have to use this UML stereotype interface. UML stereotype interface. Now same thing, you have interface name remote control, and you are using this UML stereotype interface. So that mainly indicates that it's an interface, not a class. So it looks like a class. Your interface looks like a class. Interface looks like a class, okay? Now, first section, can you see anything? There is no attribute section. Please note here that there is no attribute section. Okay, then what? You have the methods here or the operations. You have the methods or operations. So you can see here is you have weather report, status report, and under this one remote control you have start instrument, stop instrument, collect data, provide data. So all those methods you have. So here the figure shows two interfaces that may be defined for the weather station. So the left hand interface is a reporting interface. You can see here this is a reporting interface. What does it do? That defines the operation names that are used to generate weather and status reports. So you can see here one is weather report, another one is the status report. Weather report and status report. Okay. These map directly to operations in the weather station object. So these map directly to operations in the weather station object. One more interface you have, that is the remote control interface. It provides 4 operations which map onto a single method in the weather station object. So you can see 4 operations: start instrument, stop instrument, collect data, provide data. Okay. This is about the interface specification. Next we'll move to a new topic, that is design patterns. So we are not going to learn more about this, but you must be knowing what is a design pattern. Okay. So what is a pattern? The pattern is a description of the problem. So you have some problem statement with you, means that is actually the description of that problem statement is nothing but a pattern. It's nothing but a pattern. And the essence of its solution, and what is the essence of its solution? So that the solution may be reused in different settings. So you can reuse that solution in several cases. But keep in mind that the pattern is not a detailed specification. So just a brief description of the problem statement I can tell, and the essence of its solution, where you can reuse that solution. Okay, so usually they will ask what is a design pattern. Now we will see the essential elements of this design pattern. So we have 4 essential elements of design patterns. 4. Keep in mind we have 4 elements of design patterns, and these were defined by the gang of 4 in their patterns book. Okay, so first element is a name that is a meaningful reference to the pattern. Okay, now you have the pattern with you. You have to give a name to that pattern, which should be very meaningful. You have to give name to that pattern, which should be very meaningful. So a name that is a meaningful reference to the pattern. Clear? Second one, a description of the problem area that explains when the pattern may be applied. So first thing is, you give a name for your pattern, so this name should be meaningful. Second thing is a description of the problem area. It should not be very lengthy description or detailed description, just a brief description of the problem you can tell, where you can highlight where exactly you can apply this pattern, or where this pattern can be used, in which case can you use it. Third one, a solution description of the parts of the design solution, their relationships and their responsibilities. So third one is something related to solution for your design pattern. So you need to try to explain the solution. May not be a complete solution, at least for certain design parts you can specify the solution. Okay, that is the third element. Fourth element is a statement of the consequences. This is very important. The results and trade-offs of applying the pattern. So you can final element, you can specify what is the result of that solution being applied to the pattern. So what might be the result, consequence? What is the advantage? You can specify. This can help designers understand whether or not a pattern can be used in a particular situation. So what happens is, this will help the designers to analyze that particular pattern and they can decide when to use that pattern. In which case, if you use that pattern, it will be better. So that is the fourth point. Okay. So we have 4 elements for our design pattern. One is the name for the pattern. Second one is the description of problem area. Third one is the solution. Fourth one is the consequences. So these 4 elements of design patterns are very important. These 4 elements of design patterns are very important. Now let us see an example which will help you to analyze what is a design pattern. So we have an example for an observer pattern. So your pattern name is observer. So just look at this pattern name, observer. Description. So it's something related to observing a particular object from a certain distance, it can be. So description separates the display of the state of an object from the object itself and allows alternative displays to be provided. So it's something like you're displaying the state of an object by observation. So you have alternative displays. When the object state changes, all displays are automatically notified and updated to reflect the change. So when the object state changes, okay, so you think that the same object you are changing its position, so the display also changes that. So it should be automatically notified and updated to reflect the change in the state of an object. Okay, next, problem description. Now we'll see what is the problem description. So it should not be a detailed specification as I have told. So in many situations, you have to provide multiple displays of state information. Multiple displays of state information, changing of the state of the object. Such as a graphical display, you can give a graphical display like your bar chart, pie chart, like that. And a tabular display also if you give, that's in a table form data. So which helps you to clearly understand. Not all of these may be known when the information is specified. All alternative presentations should support interaction. And when that state is changed, all displays must be updated. So whenever there is change in the state of the object, the display also changes. So it should be updated. It should be updated. Next, solution description. I didn't complete the problem description. This pattern may be used in all situations where more than one display format for state information is required. So where you can use this pattern, when more than one display format is required, then you can use this pattern. And where it is not necessary for the object that maintains the state information to know about the specific display formats used. Okay. So next one is solution description. solution, description. So we are describing the solution here, that is the third element. First one is the pattern name, second one is the description, third one is the solution description. Okay, this involves two abstract objects. So we are taking two abstract objects, subject and observer, and two concrete objects. Two abstract objects we are taking, subject and observer. Two concrete objects, that is concrete subject and concrete object, which inherit the attributes of the related abstract objects. So we have two abstract objects, subject and observer, and we have two concrete objects also. These two concrete objects, they inherit from these abstract objects. The abstract objects include general operations that are applicable in all situations. So it will, your abstract objects will include all the normal operations. The state to be displayed is maintained in concrete subject. So now regarding the information about the state of the object, that is maintained in this concrete object. Which inherits operations from subject. It inherits the operations from subject, allowing it to add and remove observers. Okay, so each observer corresponds to a display. So one observer, one display. So he will be viewing your object. One observer will be viewing your object and you will get one display. And to issue a notification when the state has changed. Okay, so this concrete subject can inherit the properties from the subject class. Also it can add and remove the observers, and it can issue a notification when the state has changed. Clear? So the concrete observer maintains a copy of the state of concrete subject. So concrete observer role is to maintain the copy of the state of that concrete subject, and it implements the update interface of observer that allows these copies to be kept in step. Now the concrete observer automatically displays the state and reflects the changes whenever the state is updated. So concrete observer will automatically display the state, and also it will reflect any changes once the state is updated. And the consequences, last element is the consequence. So the subject only knows the abstract observer and does not, the subject will be knowing only about the abstract observer. It doesn't know the details of the concrete class. That is the main thing. Okay, therefore there is minimal coupling between these objects. Why? Because the subject class and the subject class will be knowing only about the abstract observer, but will not have any idea about the concrete class. So there is minimal coupling between these objects. Because of this lack of knowledge, optimizations that enhance display performance are impractical. So changes to the subject may cause a set of linked updates to observers to be generated, some of which may not be necessary. So this is one simple example for your pattern observer. So just we'll see the display here. This pattern can be used in situations where different presentations of an object state are required. So where can you use this pattern? Where suppose you want to represent the presentation of your object in different states. It separates the object that must be displayed from the different forms of presentation. So we can see in the figure, So I told that they can use graphical representation or tableau. So this is something graphical, pie chart. This is bar graph, and this is the tabular I can tell. So you can see multiple displays. So just you can see that we have one observer 1, another one is observer 2, and this is your subject. So you just see here A14, B25, C15, D20. Okay, so the range here in bar graph it is represented A14, B25, C15, D is 20. Same thing in pie. So pie chart. So this is from observer 1 point of view and this is from observer 2 point of view. Clear? Okay. So the displays are different. Data is same. Graphical representations are normally used to illustrate the object classes in patterns and their relationship. So we are going for graphical representation if you want to illustrate the design patterns. These supplement the pattern description and add detail to the solution description. So you can just see one representation in UML and UML model of the observer pattern. You have the pattern observer. We are showing the UML model. Clear? Observer is your pattern. I am showing the UML model. So subject is one class. Do you agree? Yeah. So attach observer, detach observer means actually that class has the right to attach an observer, add an observer, delete an observer. Okay. Notify and send notifications also to all the observers. Okay. Then what is this one? Aggregation. So subject is composed of concrete subject. So there you will get the state because in concrete subject class, see this type of notation is what? Aggregation. So subject class is comprised of concrete subject, I can tell. So this class actually maintains the state information of the object. So get state, subject state. Okay, next we have observer, one more class. So what is this one? Sorry, yes, this is aggregation, this is generalization. Okay. This is also generalization. Generalization means inheriting. So we are taking two classes, subject and observer initially. Subject and observer are two classes. So from these two classes, other two classes are inheriting. This is inheritance. Okay. So one is concrete subject, another one is concrete observer. So observer has the right to update any changes in the state of the object, and concrete subject will store maintain the state information of that object. Okay. Now observer, you can see here what is this notation? Aggregation, comprised of. Okay, it is aggregation. So this is just the UML model representation for your observer pattern. Next is the implementation issues. So we will see some of the implementation issues that are very important in software engineering. So first one is reuse. So all of you have heard of this word reuse. What is that? Reusing the already existing code. Yeah. Reusing existing components or systems. Like for example, you are doing a hardware project, you think. So it comprises of different hardware components. So it's not that all the components you are building it newly. No, you are designing it newly. You are taking some of the already built systems or built hardware components, and then you are composing it all together to form your new system, which will be very easy, no? So reusing existing systems or components. In the case of software code also, some set of software code you can reuse in your program and you can create a new program. So make use of existing code as much as possible while developing software. So what happens is the time is also saved there, efficiency is also improved, you can deliver the software quickly. Clear? Okay. So now software reuse is possible at a number of different levels. So software reuse is possible at a number of different levels. So what is that level? We'll see first level, abstraction level. Abstraction level. So here the software is not reused directly, but knowledge of successful abstractions in the design is being used. So first level is abstraction level. Abstraction level. So in this level, what can you see that? What can you see? The software is not reused directly. You are not reusing the software directly here. But then what you are using? The knowledge of successful abstractions which you have used in the design process, that has been reused here. The knowledge of the successful abstractions in the design is being used here. Okay. Now next level is object level. Next level is object level. So what is this? Here you directly reuse objects from a library rather than writing the code yourself. So there are some library functions I can tell. So you can directly reuse such things instead of sitting and writing once again. Okay, writing lines of code for it. So wasting your time. For example, if you need to process mail messages in a Java program, so you are implementing a Java program, you are writing a Java program, and in between you need to send mail messages. Okay, so to process that, again for sending that mail message, you should not sit and write the API. Already that API is available. So you may use objects and methods from a Java mail library. So you have actually Java mail library, Java mail API already. That library, that API is available. You can use the classes or the objects in that from that API. Clear? Next one is component level. Component level. Components are nothing but collections of objects and object classes that operate together to provide related functions and services. So components are what? Collections of objects, I can tell, and object classes that will operate together to provide some functionality. So one has to adapt and extend the component by adding some code of his or her own. So you are taking that component completely, okay, you are reusing it, but you have to add something new to it or extend its functionality by adding some. How can you do it? By adding some your own code to it. For example, building a user interface using a framework. Already you have different frameworks, Java framework, .NET framework. So you can build a user interface using that framework. Next level is system level. System level. So here your system level means you are reusing entire application system. You are reusing the entire application system. So this usually involves some kind of configuration of the systems. Now when you are reusing the entire system, you have to check the compatibility. That is very, very important. you have to check the compatibility or the configuration of the systems. This may be done by adding and modifying code or by using the system's own configuration interface. So this may be done by adding the code or modifying the code or by using the system's own configuration interface. So next we'll see about the configuration management. During the development process, many different versions of each software component are created. Okay, if you don't keep track of these versions in a configuration management system, so what is actually configuration management system? See, suppose you develop a software, then the version of that software should be maintained. Like now Java, for Java, installing Java onto your laptop, you are using JDK. So you are installing that JDK. So now the JDK version is 13 or 14, might be. But earlier it was JDK 1, isn't it? It starts from 1.1, like that it goes on. JDK 2, JDK 3, JDK 4, 5. So how many versions are there? So you need to keep track of it because you cannot name the same version. And you must know that in which version, what is the feature embedded in it. And from the latest version, you should be able to compare. You need to tell that in the latest version, what features are added. So like you have seen the Android. So Android or Eclipse. So you have so many versions there. Eclipse IDE, if I take Galileo, Jupyter, Oxygen, all those are the different releases. Then when you consider Android also, Lollipop, Ice Cream Sandwich, all those are different versions. So you need to keep track of those versions. You are liable to include the wrong versions. Don't include the wrong versions. Next, configuration management is the process of managing a changing software system. So it's not only you are maintaining the versions of the system, it's like you're managing a changing software system. Managing a changing software system. So configuration management is the process of managing a changing software system. So the aim of this configuration management system is to support the system integration process so that all developers can access the project code and documents in a controlled way. So what you're doing is there are different versions of the software. So if any person he wants to download it or install it on your system, you have to also support the system integration process. That is very important. So somewhere you see that when you try to install any software, it will ask download for a Windows 64-bit or Linux. So you should be able to support for the system integration also. Find out what changes have been made and compile and link components to create a system. So everything compatibility you have to decide in this configuration management system. Keep track of the versions, manage the changing software, then also you should be able to integrate with the system. No? So systems compatibility also you have to see. Now, there are 3 configuration management activities. First one is version management, second one is system integration, third one is problem tracking. So we'll see the first one, version management, where support is provided to keep track of the different versions of software component. So version management means you are keeping track of the different versions of your software. Next one, system integration, where support is provided to help developers define what versions of components are used to create each version of a system. So here you have the software, different versions also you have, but the developers need to install it on their system and they need for their code, isn't it? So to run their code, for that purpose you should make the versions of the components available to them so that they can use it. This description is then used to build a system automatically by compiling and linking the required components. So you have to make available all those components to them so that they can automatically build the system and they can compile and link all those components to the system. Clear? Next, problem tracking, where support is provided to allow users to report bugs and other problems. So users, once they start using it, so they can you should provide a platform where they can report the bugs or whatever problems they face, and to allow all developers to see who is working on these problems and when they are fixed. So the developers should be able to see who's working on all those codes or software and how it is being fixed. Third one is host target development. Host target development. So you know which is a host, which is a target. Most software development is based on a host target model. So most of the software development is based on a host target model. So software is developed on one computer, okay? So that will be your host. Software is developed on one computer, which will be the host, but it runs on a separate machine, that will be the target. So software you are developing on one computer, that will be your host computer, and but you are running it on another machine, that will be your target machine. So I can tell where the machine on which where you are developing your code, that will be the development platform. Development platform. One is the development platform and other is an execution platform. So one is a development platform, that is your host, and other one is the execution platform. So a platform is more than just hardware, I can tell. It includes the installed operating system. Platform, when I tell, it includes operating system plus other supporting software also. Okay. When I talk about platform, it's the operating system plus the supporting software such as a database it can have, or for development platforms, an interactive development environment, IDE, that also it can be there. A software development platform should provide a range of tools to support software engineering processes. So not only about the operating system, your platform means it's not only the operating system, it should also provide certain tools to support your software engineering processes. So these may include, first one is a compiler, which is very, very important. Now you install Java, but you need a compiler, you need a debugger, okay, and you also need to execute it, isn't it? So an integrated compiler and syntax directed editing system that allows to create, edit and compile the code. So one thing is you need a compiler, another one is a editor to actually create the code, edit the code, compile the code. Second one is a language debugging system. You have written the code, you can debug it to see whether there are any errors or not. So you need a debugger. C is graphical editing tools. This is what for graphical design, graphical editing tools, such as tools to edit your UML models. If you are using any UML models, you can edit it using this graphical editing tools. D is testing tools. You have already some frameworks for this one like JUnit. This is available. If you install it, this will automatically run a set of tests on your program. And E is project support tools that help you organize the code for different development projects. That is project support tools. Next topic is open source development. So you have studied about open source software, you have used it. So open source development is an approach to software development in which the source code of a software system is published. The source code of that software system is published and volunteers are invited to participate in the development process. So what is open source development is source code of your software system is published and it will invite all the participants. Volunteers are invited to participate in that development process. So its roots are mainly you can see in the Free Software Foundation. Free Software Foundation, that is http www.fsf Free Software Foundation fsf.org. So if you go there, you will get that, which advocates that source code should not be proprietary but rather should be always available for users to examine and modify as they wish. So if you go to this site, you will get the source code available freely. So the main intention is to make them available free so that users can start use it. Still they can modify or reflect any changes. The best known open source product is your Linux. Everyone is using Linux operating system, which is widely used as a server system and increasingly as a desktop environment also. Other important open source products are Java, Apache Web Server, and the MySQL database which you are using. Major players in the computer industry such as IBM company and Sun, they support the open source movement. So these two companies, they support the open source movement and base their software on open source products. Now we'll see these open source licenses. They are derived from one of the three general models. These open source licenses are derived from one of the three general models. This is very, very important. So we'll see the three models, general models. First one is the GNU, General Public License. GPL we call GPL, General Public License. So this is also called as reciprocal license. That means if you use open source software that is licensed under the GPL license, then you must make that software open source. So first model is GPL, GNU, General Public License. So this is also called as reciprocal license. Means that suppose you are using open source software that is licensed under this GPL, then you have to make that software open source. Okay. Next, the GNU Lesser General Public License, LGPL, Lesser General Public License. This is a variant of your GPL license where you can write components that link to open source code without having to publish the source of these components. So you can write components that link to open source code. Okay, you can write components that link to open source code without having to publish the source of these components. However, if you change the licensed component, then you must publish this as open source. Okay, otherwise no. So if you are changing this licensed component, then you must publish this as open source. C, the Berkeley Standard Distribution License, BSD. See, this is a non-reciprocal license. Means you are not obliged to republish any changes or modifications made to open source code. So you cannot republish any changes or modifications made to the open source code. You cannot republish any changes or modifications made to open source code. So you can include the code in proprietary systems that are sold. But if you use open source components, you must acknowledge the original creator of that code. Original creator of the code. So if you are using open source component, you cannot republish any changes. And if you are using the open source components, you must acknowledge the creator of that is the original creator of the code. So let us revise some of the UML diagrams. First one is the activity diagram for tier management system. So I hope you know what is tier management system. It's a system which maintains the details of all the tour packages, and you can book whichever tour packages you require. So you want to make a travel to different destinations means you can go through this site and book it online. So first, this is an activity diagram. So this block indicates the initial state and this is the final state. Okay, this one is the initial state and this is the final state. Now request the scheme or the system, anything. So if you are a new customer to this site, first you have to register yourself. So you have register customer, means you have to do the registration process first. So you have to fill all the details, verify it and successfully do the registration. And once you are registered, then you will become a registered customer. So you can request the scheme, means you will get the new tour information. All the tour informations, travel destination informations will be given. And you know that you have to select the tour package. So everything comes in package. Like if you are selecting a destination, then for how many days you have to select, 3 to 4 days package or 10 to 12 days package. So you must be knowing that how much amount also it costs, because where you are for traveling cost, staying cost, food cost, all those costs will be added to your tour package. So it comes in a package amount. So you have to select that package, whether it is for only one member or two members, for family. So all those you have to decide. So you first you have to go through the tour information, all the tour information available. You have to search for your destination which you want. Okay, you search for your destination which you want and then select the tour package and reserve the tour. So you can reserve that tour package. Now you have to do the payment. So all your card details should be given and there will be a gateway which will access your card details and your transaction will be successful. And if you don't reserve the tour, now you can see here more packages. So you have to see through the other packages and you have to decide which package you want to choose. Okay, so that is selecting the tour package. Then reserve the tour, make payment. So payment should be done online. So once your payment is done, you will get a confirmation message that your transaction is successful. So you will get from the site also one more message, notification that your tour package has been booked for so many days, like that. And what is this new tour information all will be, you can update here. Okay, so this is the final state. This is the final state. Now next, you have already studied about library management system. Library management system, no? Yeah. So we will see the class diagram. What is class diagram? You are listing out the different classes. So you have to show the different classes in your system. You need to show the different classes in your system. So we have the library management system, user type, username, password. Okay, and login, register, logout. Okay. Now which are the different classes here now? User, user. Why One is the user class, another one is the book class, another one is the librarian class, another one is the library database. Library database. So see how many classes are there in this system, library management system. One is the user class, another one is the account class. You have also staff class, student class, book class, librarian class, library database class also. So we'll come to user class. Okay, first user class. What are the attributes here? Username and its ID. And what user can do? Verify, check the account, get book information. These are the operations. Now, can you see this type of notation? What does it indicate? Generalization or inheritance. It indicates generalization or inheritance. What does it mean? You are inheriting a new class from already existing class. So, which are the two subclasses? One is staff, another one is student. Okay, so staff, which department he belongs to, student, which class. These are attributes. These are attributes. Now, can you see this one, diamond shape? What type of relationship it is? What type of relationship? Aggregation. Yeah, correct. It's aggregation. Means this user is composed of account, I can tell. Account classes. The attributes are no borrowed books. Number of borrowed books. So what are the data represented in this account class, stored in this account class? Number of borrowed books, number of reserved books, number of returned books, number of lost books, also the fine amount if the book is not returned on the due date. And here the method is calculate fine. Calculate fine. Now next we have the book class. Book class. So the attributes are title, book title, author, ISBN number. Book ISBN number is very important, then publication. So under this the operations are show due date, reservation status, feedback, book request, renew information. Another class is librarian. Okay, so here the attributes are librarian name, ID, password, then search tree. You can search, isn't it? Then verify librarian search. Then you have library database class. So what is the attribute? List of books, and the operations are add, delete, update, display, search. Okay, so can you see this notation? What does it indicate? Again, aggregation. Okay, so we can tell this library management system is comprised of these classes: user, book, librarian, library database. Okay, and also it shows the association between these classes, that is the type of relationship between these classes. Can you see here? Library management system 1 and user. What is the relationship? 1 star, 1:n. This system can be used by n users. Okay, then we'll see user and book. N users can can borrow n books. Okay, then library management system 1:n. So this system can provide n books. The library management system and librarian, can you see what is the association? 1:1 means one library management system can have one librarian, librarian and library database 1:1. So each librarian will be maintaining only one database, keep in mind. Then library database and book, can you see 1:n? What is that? Each database, library database, will be having the records of all the books, n books. Library database and account, that also 1:n, 1:n. Okay, anywhere then I have left book and the librarian, n books and one librarian. Okay, next let us see the use case diagram for event management system. Event, suppose some event you want to conduct. Okay, so nowadays you can give that entire event to a event management team. They will only arrange the event, so you just have to give the money, that's all. They will do all type of arrangements. So main advantage is you need not waste much of time there, and the organization of that event also will be very good. So you have to show the use case diagram. So in the use case diagram, first we'll look into the actors. First let us see into the actors. So one actor is user, another one is admin, another one is manager, and here we have volunteer. So we have 4 actors, keep in mind. One is the user, admin, manager and volunteer. Okay, so one is user, another one is admin, then manager, volunteer. So now user, first he has to do registration. That is very important. He has to do the registration. So he has to click on the register button, and then he had to put all his details, save it and submit it. So he becomes a registered user now. Next he can log into it. So with those details. Okay, and he will be verified there. Authentication will be there. Okay, check authentication. Next, event selection. Now he can view that all events. Okay, which event he wants to conduct. So he can select that event. Then what he can do? He has to do the payment, online payment. Then after doing successfully paying for it, he will get a confirmation message saying that the payment has been done, and then he can do log out. Now just see here, this is admin. What admin? He can log in, then he can manager profile. He can update that manager profile. He can view that manager profile. He can log out. Okay, what about manager? He can log in. He can add volunteer for that one, and he can log out. And what about volunteer? Add winner. Yes, and he can log out. Here he can log out. Next we'll see the activity diagram for college management system. So now keep in mind, this is an activity diagram. So this indicates the initial state. So start, it is written, and this indicates the end state, final state. So first you have to log into this college management system. Check user level and permissions. Okay, and here what check permission? Manage the college. This is for managing the college. Check permission, manage the student. If you want to manage the student, this permission is for managing the different courses. Like you have to specify what all courses are offered by the college. Then if any new course is added, is there introduced, add it to it, or you can remove that course. Next, check the permission, manage registration. Also you can manage the faculty information. So here you can manage college information, student information, courses information. It can be what all courses are available, and then you can manage the faculty information. And finally you can log out from the system. Clear? So these are things, again individually how you are going to manage, you have to specify. Okay. Next we'll see the use case diagram for car rental system. So we have actors here. This is the user, insurance company, employees, and this is the manager. So user can log in. You can do the registration first and then log in. He can search for the car, which car is available for rent. Then he can select that car. After that he has to reserve it, reservation, and then he has to do the payment. Okay, so first he has to reserve that car and then he has to do the payment. Employee, what he can do, employee of this car rental system can also log in, maintain all the car information, which all cars are available for rental, view daily rental reports, so daily day-to-day report of how many cars have been rented, and also manager can and generate the bill. Employees can generate the bill. Manager, he can view the monthly rental reports. Okay, so let us see the sequence diagram for courier management system. So here you can see the actor, correct? This is an actor. Administrator is an actor. So here these all are object classes. So you have employee registration, one class, source creation, another class, address details, another class, reports, another class. So these are the different classes. One is the employee registration, source creation, address details, reports. Okay, so administrator first, he will send the employee details. Okay, so this is employee registration. Employee details will be sent. First, so then you can update the employee details. Employee registration will update the employee details. Then you can, administrator can create new source. So source creation means from where? Source created successfully. So this class will give the acknowledgement, source created successfully. So once again I'll tell. First, the administrator will send all these employee details, and in the employee registration, it will update all those employee details. Administrator can create the source. Source creation class will create that source successfully. Now, administrator will enter the address details for existing source. So, it is stored in this address details class. So that will get updated address details. Now administrator will request for reports. So that is sent to this report class. So here the method will be invoked for your report class. So finally it will view report based on the request sent. So it will send back the response, that is the report, and administrator will be able to view the report based on the request. Next we'll see use case diagram. Okay, use case diagram for online railway reservation system. So you can see that this is the actor, so he is the passenger. This is the actor, so he is the passenger. What the passenger has to do first? Register himself, correct? That is most important thing. So he has to do the registration, and then only he can log in. So once he has logged in successfully, okay, he can do an online inquiry. Okay, fill details of the journey. Yeah, he can do the online inquiry there, and he can book the ticket. So in booking the ticket, it will include all the details. He has to put all the details of his journey. So clear, first online inquiry whether the train is available or not. So once it is available, he can book the ticket. So in that it includes what? You have to fill the details of the journey, and in that also it includes the payment. So you have to make the payment also. So while making the payment, you know that you have to specify your email ID or mobile number. So what you will do is through the gateway your card and credentials will be taken, and transaction will be done. So once the transaction is successful, you will get a confirmation message. So send email or SMS, the transaction is successful, and the system will tell your ticket has been booked successfully. In case you want to cancel the ticket, means you have to, you can also do that one, cancel the ticket, and you can check the status also on that day, what time your train will be arrived, all those you can check. Now in cancel ticket, can you see it includes what? You can receive the money on cancellation with constraint, so it will be refunded, the money will be refunded. So this is the use case diagram for online railway reservation system. Okay, now let us see the use case diagram for banking system. So use case diagram, so here you can see two actors. One is the customer, okay, another one is the bank employee, we'll consider, okay, another one is the bank employee. Now can you see here bank transactions, you can withdraw the money. So this is cashier. So one actor is customer and another actor is cashier. There are two actors now here. There are two actors, and this entire thing in the box is your bank transaction system. In ATM we are considering, okay. So you can withdraw the money, no? So for withdrawing the money, you have to put the card. Can you see here? You have to put the card. And after putting the card, it will verify the card, and you have to put the PIN number. That is very, very important. 4-digit PIN number you need to put. Okay. Is it clear? Okay. Now you can also display the balance, deposit. For that you have to put the bank name, account number, and what the cashier can do, he can all this he can record the deposit, record the withdrawal details, even withdraw the money. Clear? Okay. Next we'll see the activity diagram. So can you see here, one is customer, another class is ATM machine, another class is bank. So you have three classes. One is customer, another one is ATM machine, and the third class is bank. So you have three classes. Now where it begins, this is the initial state. This is the initial state. So what does the customer do? He enters the ATM machine, ATM machine room. So first he inserts the ATM card. Can you see here? He inserts the ATM card. So you do the same thing. So this is one activity. How you are representing the notation is very important. Next, after inserting the ATM card, you can notice that for some time it will validate the ATM card. Means read your card details and validate it. Means whether you're authorized user or not, it will check. Okay, so that is done by the ATM machine. Means in turn backend, which is doing that one? Bank is doing that one. Okay. Now, if it is invalid, what happens? So this is decision making now. If it is invalid, it will eject the card. The card will be ejected. So card comes out. Again you have to insert the card and do it. So after eject the card, you have to take the card. Take the card, and can you see the end state, final state? It's over. That one particular process is over. So next process is you have to again insert the ATM card. Correct? You have to again insert the ATM card. So this is if it is invalid, the card will be ejected out. If it is valid, what happens? It will ask for the PIN. Enter the PIN. So PIN, that is 4-digit number, which is very secret one. So only the bank and the customer will be known. Now what does he do? He enters the PIN. Now that PIN also will be authorized. PIN also. So see here, ATM card is validated by the ATM machine. ATM card is being so it comes under this ATM machine class. Can you notice that? Yes, you can notice that. See this. These all things are done by the customer. This is done by the ATM machine. This is done by the bank. So what is done by the customer? He will insert the ATM card. He will insert the ATM card. Okay, now ATM machine will validate the ATM card. Now the customer will enter the PIN. The PIN is authorized by the bank. Correct? By the bank itself. So it will be authorized. If it is invalid PIN, again card is ejected by your ATM machine only. Then you have to take the card. Customer has to take back the card. So then you reach the final state. Then you have reached the final state. Is it clear? Now we'll continue here. Authorized PIN. If it's a valid PIN, then it will ask enter the amount. Usually nowadays first, enter the amount. So what you want to do transaction, it will ask for different options there. Withdrawal from savings or this one. So you enter the amount, how much amount you want to withdraw. Okay. Then you can check the balance also after withdrawal. If balance amount is, if whatever amount you have withdrawn, you want to withdraw, is greater than the balance amount, then what happens? Debit account, debit account. See, if balance amount less than, if balance is greater than the amount, are you understanding here the condition? If balance is greater than the amount, whatever amount you have entered is less than the balance, then you can take the money from the slot. Okay, and also your account will be debited. Immediately you will get a SMS. This much has been debited from your account. Now suppose the balance is less than the amount you have entered. Suppose the balance is less than the amount you have entered, then what happens? It will show the balance. It will tell you have this much of balance. Like suppose I want to withdraw 5,000 and there is only 3,000 amount. then it will show the balance. And then can you do the transaction? No. So you have to eject the card and customer has to take the card. So same thing, if balance is greater than amount, then he can take the money from the slot. So it will show the balance also at that time. It will show the balance, and you can also eject the card. After you have got the money from the slot, you can eject the card. The card will be ejected and then you can take the card. So keep in mind that the card will be ejected. Once the card is ejected, only you can take the card. In between that, you cannot take the card. Then this is the final state. This is the final state being reached. Thank you.